Hi, I'm Don Lewis. I was part of a committee that was formed about 3 years ago when a couple of old distillation pots or kettles were found on a piece of county property, and then the Farm Museum got the idea of what they ought to do because of the uniqueness of this product to the area to put an exhibit together here at the Farm Museum. And I was called along with a few other guys to design how that would be set up, trying to make it like it used to be, basically. And given what we were starting with, which is a couple of cast iron kettles with the bottoms rusted out, it wasn't much. So I was challenged by somebody to find a real distillation system, find a real wormseed still, which turned out to be quite an undertaking in that even though there were a huge number of these that existed in kind of a tri-county area, Carroll, Howard, and Frederick, that they had pretty much all disappeared because of the lack of business, the lack of product to produce. So I did a eyes-on, hands-on look for from a document that was done by I guess it was Montgomery County Historical Society, of one that was on Kemptown Road. I went to the spot where that was the last one that was known, and it was gone. But I happened to be able to talk to a lady that was there that said, you ought to go talk to Robert and Rosie Day that live in the Iamsville area near Frederick. They'll be able to tell you more. And when I went there, I found out they had one that had been sitting there idle for like 40 years. They had bought the pieces, put it together, and so talked with them about donating it to the Farm Museum, which they agreed to do, and here we are. Wormseed is it's a weed, basically, that grows in this region fairly often, still can find it growing as a weed, but it was discovered in the late 1800s, I guess it was, that it actually could be used, or the oil from the seeds of the wormseed plant could be used as a agent against worms, whether it be human or animal, intestinal worms, roundworm, hookworm, that kind of a thing. The needs primarily were that of intestinal worms in animals. It was also used in humans, but there was a problem in that the toxicity, well, it's a very, very toxic material. So getting the dose right was important. But unlike today, when we have very, very strong analytical equipment to be able to test for what the quality, the strength, if you will, of the material would be, all they used at that point in time was a hydrometer measuring specific gravity. So that's as good as it got. There was still a need for material, and given that need, it was being laboratory produced. And the business basically phased out in the 60s, though the still that the days ran did run up until early 70s for a very, very niche market. Now, beyond the animal use, intestinal worms, it was also used in paints for the hulls of ships because it would kill any of the sea worms that would start to eat the wood. So the Germans used a lot of this material in the paint for their ships. And secondly, the clipper ships that used to sail so much in the bay used it as well. I mean, this was, it is an oil that comes out of the seed, and that is what is recovered, packaged, and shipped to the people that would put the compound together to be given to an animal, or back in the day, a human within that. Given the time, I mean, back in the 1920s through 1950s, it was a very significant product for the farmers. The kettles or pots, what I would call from a professional aspect a distillation pot, but at the time it was called a kettle, would be filled with the dried wormseed plant. The whole plant would go into the kettle. And they would stomp as much in there, literally stomp it in. Humans would get in on top of it and pound it down to get as much packed into these kettles as possible. Typically they were 5 to 6 foot in diameter and maybe 4 to 6 foot tall. And then it would be sealed up on the top. All of them had a steam boiler that would generate steam that would be charged into the bottom of these kettles, build up some pressure, and then it would be, the vapor would then be released through a condenser. They called them troughs. It was basically a series of pipes that would run through a wooden trough filled with water. And out of the other end of the pipe would come the liquid. Now the liquid in that case was the condensed oil and water from the steam. But it would co-distill, the oil would co-distill with the steam. And then when it came out of the end of the pipe as liquid and put into drums, then they would decant, taking the oil, the lighter layer off the top, and that was your product. In spite of it not working. And I should add on, I guess, it's the last one in the world, at least the last one that we know of. So.
Wow, this distillery.
This is the only one there be.